You know, perspective is a funny thing. For example, Americans think blowing your nose in a tissue in public is rude and gross and much prefer making that disgusting suction noise with your nose, while the opposite is true here in Italy, and thank God, though we do spit. A lot. I'm derailing again. Perspective! Perspective changes your view on the world, and you sometimes gain perspective with experience. Or a good 3.5 minutes thinking about your future while you're sitting in the toilet with your pet T-Rex skull and plushy snake having at each other again in the other room, and time. Perspective takes time. One day the animation company you work for is convinced Pocahontas will be a greater hit than whatever silly movie about lions you and your second-class colleagues are working on, and then 25 years later only your movie is getting a remake, while the other won't. It won't. It's 2019, come on. Let's be real, Pocahontas ain't gonna get a remake. The point I'm trying to get in at is I didn't have a proper introduction for this video and had to come up with one on the spot, and all things considered, I'ma give myself a solid 7 out of 10. So, speaking of perspective and long periods of time before an event and another, you know I haven't watched The Lion King in over 10 years, the animated version naturally, and have never seen it in English. So let's put this movie to the test, shall we? Let's challenge our perspective on it, revisit it, and see if it truly stood the test of time. I got surprisingly little to say about it. First of all, I know you already did it, but I sincerely encourage you to revisit this movie too. Form your own opinion, enjoy it, but also analyze it, as I did, and yeah, I enjoyed it, a lot. I probably liked it even more than I liked it as a kid. So that's all, see you next time, subscribe! No, but seriously, let's try and collect our thoughts a bit, because this newfound appreciation for this movie made me realize what an immortal masterpiece it is, and I want to explore why this is the case, why I feel the way I do about this movie. Let's establish a point of comparison. The first time I watched The Lion King, I was way too little, and so I can't remember the day or the experience. But rewatching it, I found that I was able, at points, to recall the sensation it gave me the first time. Like going through an old photo album and not really remembering the picture themselves, but managing to recognize yourself in them. We are getting too deep and philosophical here. Can we have a clip of Pumbaa farting? Yeah, thanks. What I'm trying to say is, and I'll get back to it later, is that I don't remember the first time I saw the first frames of this movie. That rising sun, that powerful chorus kicking in, but I do remember the impact it had on me, the immediate realization that there was something different about this movie compared to other Disney movies I had seen prior to it. Of course, at the time, I didn't really have the means to understand what it was. The beginning of The Lion King is one of the best in cinema history. It does everything an excellent beginning should do. It wows the audience, instantly hooking them, it sets the tone the movie is going for perfectly, the music, which is amazing but we'll get to that, establishes the whole theme of the movie, it introduces a fair amount of the cast of characters of this movie, their relationship with one another, subconsciously tells you which character you should invest the greater amount of attention to, does a rather surprising amount of world building. Which, mind you, is not something restricted to fantasy settings. Here you immediately get that there's some sort of monarchy in place among the animals in the savannah. You get who the king is, and you get that, despite being a predator, he is respected and loved by subjects. Seeing how they all come to witness the birth of the young prince, and cheers and hail him with sincere joy and excitement. Thus you get that the king reign is a just and good one, you get the king has servants and he's close friends with them. You get Rafiki is some sort of shaman, and thus you're not put off when much later in the movie actual magic and extra-planar interaction with ghosts in the beyond happens. In a movie with real animals in a realistic setting. And why is that? Because in its first minutes, the movie has set up some sort of highly spiritual magic to be possible due to the character of Rafiki and every animal of the savannah all knowing, seemingly instinctually, even magically one could say, to march towards the same destination. What this masterful introduction makes clear is an established ritual in the setting the movie takes place in. No, I'm not done overanalyzing this intro, see what else I can still get out of these first 4 minutes. The beginning of this movie is even capable of implementing, multiple times, two of the most effective and satisfying techniques in storytelling: setups and payoffs. You all know what those are, right? Of course you do. So let's establish that before I move on to explain them anyways. To make it quick, when writing, a setup is an element in the story that promises or hints that it's gonna be important or it will get resolved later in the story via payoff, which is what I just described. It pays off the attention brought on the element of the story that was set up prior. Well-made setups and payoffs enhances a story and makes the audience engaged. Mystery is an engaging thing. Due to human nature, if something raises a question, we feel good once that question receives an answer, and so we engage in the wait for that answer to come. That is the core of setups and payoffs. And you can do them well, you can do them poorly, you can do them not if you're stinking frozen, but point is, engagement is the most valuable thing that a movie first minutes has to earn from the audience, and even if you may not realize it, setups and payoffs are heavily utilized in the beginning of The Lion King, and they're stealthy, they're hard to notice. Of course, the entire beginning of the movie is a setup for the end of the movie, with the theme of the circle of life and all, but if we confine ourselves solely in the first minutes of the picture, at first it seems as the movie opens with every animal in the wilderness simply waking up and facing a new sunrise in the African savannah. Yet we quickly understand that this isn't any other ordinary day, as we see them all looking in the same direction, then marching towards that same direction. That naturally and subconsciously raises the question, where are they going to? Once we see that they are moving towards Pride Rock, we get our payoff, yet we ask the following question: why are they going there? Which is then resolved with the most spectacular of payoffs. There's one last thing at the beginning of this movie that I haven't really addressed yet, and it is the most important of all. It's freaking beautiful. The visual, the music, the colors all coming together. I don't have to tell you this, but this is why the beginning of The Lion King is one of the best in cinema history. Let's talk music now, shall we? Okay, now editing these videos, you better believe me when I say I've heard these tunes a lot, and I gotta say, I unsurprisingly love them. The soundtrack of this movie is my second favorite out of all of them from Disney, though I feel it has temporarily taken the #1 spot recently. But if you think I can't make 10 minutes of videos worth out of them, watch me. First of all, when I first sat down and thought about the movie, the songs were actually one of the few and tiny nitpicks I found I had with this picture. Hear me out on this one. There's definitely some stylistic inconsistency and even stylistic clash when it comes to the songs in this movie. And I purely mean from an animation and drawing point of view. Of course, Be Prepared doesn't quite sound like Can You Feel the Love Tonight. No, what I mean is, and what was bugging me was, for example, how we see elephants drawn in 3 different styles. One during the Circle of Life, the second time throughout I Just Can't Wait to Be King, and the third, different style during Hakuna Matata, and zebras too actually. Now stick with me, I know it sounds silly, let me get to my point. During I Just Can't Wait to Be King, it's pretty obvious we are suddenly seeing the world through little Simba's playful, young and lively eyes. Everything pops, it's highly stylized and cartoonish, and overall it's a very different style from the rest of the movie. This is made even clearer when the song ends and the style suddenly switches back to normal. Although if I have to be honest, I remember not being able to quite pick on that when I was little. So, okay, this song has a more than valid excuse for having such a strikingly different style. But what about the others, huh? What reason was there for them? I know it's an extremely minor and totally irrelevant nitpick, but the more I thought about it, the more it was bugging me. Until I thought about it some more. I might simply be dumb. In fact, I'm betting on the fact this little detail should have been obvious to me. But I realized I Just Can't Wait to Be King isn't the only song that blends the character it is sung by point of view on the world with what is presented on screen. All of them do. Scar sees the hyenas as a mindless, endless, and almost faceless army of troops at his disposal, and as such they appear on the screen during Be Prepared, while himself, due to his ego, raises on a pedestal far above anybody else. Hakuna Matata is sung by Timon and Pumbaa, and while they lack the pure sense of childish imagination that was in full display during Simba's song, they aren't exactly the most mature of characters, and so when Pumbaa sings about his tragic past, the tale, and thus the visual style, is highly exaggerated and goofy. Can you feel the love tonight? Tricky one, but it's the same. The focus is on the two lions falling in love with each other. They see themselves as they really are, sure, no sudden stylistic change, but the whole piece is accompanied by visual that enhances and communicate the feeling of love they are developing for one another. Told ya, obvious stuff. I simply didn't fully pick on it until now. Oh, sorry, what did you say? What about the Circle of Life? What about it? It's the same. There's definitely a stylistic change from the rest of the movie in the Circle of Life. You ever noticed how the meerkats don't really look like Timon despite them being the same species? Why is that? It is because this song being about life itself, everything in it looks more realistic and lifelike. The animals, their movement, the scenery. And there you go. That's how you change nitpickery and an inconsistency problem with the style of the movie into a more deep realization and appreciation for the care put into a conscious choice on the part of the artistic direction of a masterpiece. Yeah, the Morning Report is kind of the outlier here, but since it wasn't made along the rest of the movie in its original theatrical release, I don't think it has a saying on the matter. But I'm not done talking about songs, not even close! I told you before this was my first time watching this movie in English, and this of course led me to compare it with the Italian version which I was more familiar with. Now, let me sidestep the point for a moment. Not that I've been making much else since now. Here in Italy, we have some phenomenally good voice actors and dubbers. Adaptation teams, yeah, that's another story. But voice actors, they're the best. Trust me, Italians don't usually have much praises for their country and people. So when I first started revisiting some of my childhood favorite movies in their original language, I was kinda shocked to find out that when it comes to animated movies, the English version usually suck when compared to the Italian version. I was also surprised to see that, judging by the comment section under the Italian version of Be Prepared, a lot of people everywhere in the world considers the Italian version the better one too. In the case of The Lion King, however, I'm not among them. I told you how I usually feel when it comes to Italian versus English dubs, and I do acknowledge that a certain amount of nostalgia makes me biased. Yet that's not the case for this movie. And this speaks volumes about the quality of the voice acting in this picture. Don't get me wrong, I prefer some aspect of the Italian version I grew up with, like the actual voices for example, or the way certain things are said. But when it comes to the actual things said, and especially when it comes to the song lyrics, I prefer the original version, no contest. You know, puns and song lyrics are inevitable victims of adaptation, but this time especially they were so precious to me that despite the fact that the adaptation itself was wonderfully made, I gotta say, overall I prefer the original version a slight bit more. If only we could get I'll Be King instead of Be Prepared in the lyrics of that one song, it'd be absolutely perfect. I had expectation before rewatching this movie. It's only natural I did. I thought I'd maybe like some things more than I did when I was younger, and some I would like less. Some things I would get now for the first time, some other would not affect me like they did the first time. This is to say that, due to the fact that when I was little I used to watch this movie a lot, I expected to feel desensitized to a certain scene. And what can I say, I cried at Mufasa's death. But beside the fact that I'm a big crybaby, why is this emotional moment still so freaking effective? Gotta resist the urge. Okay, for context's sake, let's just say that to me, personally, father-son dynamics when it comes to character interactions don't quite strike home. I can appreciate a well-written father-son relationship in a story, and this is definitely the case, yet I almost never manage to emotionally relate the way most people do. So this scene has a big disadvantage when it comes to connecting with me emotionally. But then, how did it pull it off regardless of that? I can't help it. I wanted to recall what and how I felt about this scene the first time I saw it as a little kid, and I distinctively remember that the main emotion wasn't sadness for me, no, it was surprise and suspicion. Maybe it was that I hadn't fully grasped the concept of death yet, but more likely it was that I simply did not buy that Mufasa was actually dead, and it made sense to little already overly analytical me at the time. I imagine this was probably what I was thinking. Good guys in Disney movies do die from time to time, and if they are the parents of the protagonist, may God be merciful to their soul, although moms are statistically more at risk, but they always die off screen. And let's be real, it's Disney we are talking here, they wouldn't have a child approaching and crying over the actual corpse of his father. They wouldn't actually put the actual lifeless body of the protagonist's father in full display on screen. Come on, it's too crude. No, this is an emotional trap. You just watch. They're gonna make Simba cry for his father to wake up, he won't at first, and just as you think he may actually be dead, that's when they get to do the I gotcha moment and reveal he's not. I've seen it before, you can't fool me, just watch. Any second now he's gonna wake up. Any second. It's going on still. Scar's here now. Mufasa, it's your turn to wake up and beat the life out of him. Okay? Wait. No, he's alive. He's alive, I tell you. He's alive. Isn't he? I kid you not, when later in the movie Rafiki tells Simba Mufasa isn't dead, I probably jumped from my seat having the biggest I told you so moment of my life up to that point. Only of course for the movie to pull the rug from under my prematurely smugness and hit me with the cold reality. Once I saw Mufasa's spirit appear in the clouds, that is when I fully accepted he truly was dead. Yet, due to my previous skepticism, that powerful scene felt all the more bittersweet, as a sincere and profound lesson about life and death got to me in the most effective of ways. Make your children watch this masterpiece, damn it! And for the love of God, vaccinate them! So that is how I remember first reacting to this scene. And knowing that, I think we can realize how this scene still manages to get me even to this day. I believe the key thing is how real it feels. No, get that out of my face. I know, it's a cartoon talking animals and all, hear me. Of course, the scene itself is gut-wrenching. Of course, I happen to emphasize with Mufasa more now that I'm older. Of course, the voice acting on the part of Simba is phenomenally grievous. No, actually, let's stop there. I think when we were younger, the moment that stuck with us the most was the actual death. The long live the king and the fall. I remembered Simba grieving over his lifeless dad, but I didn't fully remember his reaction to his situation. And you know how some lines sound more true and genuine, while others may feel constructed or fake. It's safe to say that when you want a character to express a genuine emotion, and a strong emotion at that, like grief and desperation, you want what the character is saying to feel real, what he's going through to feel real. That is hard, guys, hard, I tell ya. But the thing is, when you're a kid, you can't really tell the difference. What I mean is, when you're a child, hopefully, ideally, you haven't yet had to deal with tragedy, desperation, true loss, and emotional panic. And so you don't really have the means to empathize with someone going through such complex feeling. You a kid, you get sad, you get happy, you get angry, doesn't get much more complex than that. So you don't realize how heavy and real this moment and the voice of that little animated lion cub on the screen feel. That is what got me. Hearing Simba's sheer desperation and pure fear and confusion and loss, hearing him screaming for help, watching him breaking into tears. For the first time I managed to realize what he was feeling, because I was watching that moment for the first time at an age where, of course, I had been through the same. I understood him and recognized myself a little in him. The fact that this movie still managed to make me have such a strong emotional response at a scene I've seen hundreds of times and I knew was coming is not something I'm ashamed to admit. The total opposite, in fact. It's a huge praise to the movie, and a true evidence of the fact that this is a timeless masterpiece of storytelling, cinema and animation. And on that last word, animation, I haven't addressed it in this scene yet. Believe me, the lines and voice acting are superb and do half of the tear-bringing and heart-stabbing of the scene. The other half, let's go ahead and actually say 60% of it, it's done by animation. I'll talk about the insane level of quality and polishedness of the animation in this movie later. But if I could spend just a couple of more words on this scene, the animation is insane. These characters are so incredibly expressive and alive, and I'm a bit unsure, especially with the first reviews and opinions coming out already, whether the remake, with its more realistically bent approach at character design, is going to pull even a comparable level of expressiveness, or whether it will fall flat. Moving on, as I already stated, I had expectation, and I did expect that if I was going to slightly dislike something rewatching this movie, that would have been Timon and Pumbaa. Well, I was surprised to find out I didn't mind them. I liked them even. To clarify, they are the comic relief of the movie. A movie that, for all of its crude and cruel moments and for the epic tale it's trying to go for, has a lot of comic reliefs actually. They are the most childish and light part of the movie. Yet I didn't dislike them as much as I thought I would. Comic relief characters are a staple of Disney movies. Yet this doesn't mean they're always good.
I'm losing to a bird!
But when they are, they can take a movie and turn it into a masterpiece. And this comedic duo is generally regarded as one of the best in Disney movies. I agree, and here's why. First of all, a comic relief first duty is to give you comedic relief. And believe me, you're gonna want that after Mufasa's death. And so here is when Timon and Pumbaa make their first appearance. And they're not simply there to make you laugh, no. They hold plot and thematic relevance. There's nothing worse than a character you could get rid of without the story needing him in the slightest. Timon and Pumbaa save Simba from death. As a side note, I want you to know I mistakenly wrote Kimba instead of Simba here on the script. Moving on. They save Kimba... I did it again. They save Simba from death. Got it. Raise him and help him regain his kingdom. They are vital to the prosecution of the story, but this doesn't excuse them from being immature, childish, slightly annoying characters, right? You're right, this doesn't, but the theme of the story does. These two characters need to be immature and carefree so that Simba will grow detached from his past, deny his identity, creating conflict once Nala comes back, reminding him what his duty is. Without Timon and Pumbaa, Simba's redemption, his victory over his uncle, that powerful "remember who you are," they would have felt hollow. So the duo is essential for the story, for it to have the impact it does. Also, and this is almost unheard of when it comes to this kind of characters, they sorta go through characters arc. Think about it. First time we see them, they decide to rescue Simba, and they do so out of selfish reason. Timon correctly predicts that if they raise and befriend a lion, they'll have protection from other predators, and Pumbaa, well, he saves the cub because he finds him cute. Which is still a selfish reason, mind you, but then, by the end of the movie, Simba has changed them just as much as they changed him. When the time comes to prove they are true friends and family, they don't hesitate to rush at their friend's hate, risking their own life for him. Think of that. Two characters whose philosophy was no worries end up putting their lives on the line for a friend. To me, that sounds like a character arc right there. And of course, I haven't addressed the most important thing about these characters. They're damn funny. I always found myself liking Timon over Pumbaa any day, but whereas when I was a kid I simply thought what he was saying was amusing, this was the first time I actually understood the slight cynicism and mean spirit behind his jokes, and I loved it.
Let me get this straight. You're the king? And you never told us?
Look, I'm still the same guy.
But with power.
I can't help it, this guy makes me laugh so much.
Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Pleasure's all mine.
How do you do?
Pumbaa, however... Okay, hear me out, cause I must say something any animation fan considers blasphemy. Burp and fart jokes are sometimes fine. I speak the truth, I swear it, I've seen it, smart and actually funny toilet humor does exist, I know, I've seen it, you have to believe me. So how did this guy do? I'd say pretty good. This joke is smart and funny.
Timon,
Yeah?
ever wonder what those sparkly dots are up there? I always thought they were balls of gas burning billions of miles away.
Pumbaa, with you, everything's gas.
Also consider this, for the entirety of The Lion King, Timon and Pumbaa both collectively burp/fart only once. Yeah, go check it. Pumbaa burps this one time and that's it. Nothing but funny jokes and character interaction from there onwards. Except for the scene of the final battle. Yeah, I don't love this part. It has some of the most epic and tense moments and some of the dumbest and unnecessary ones. Yeah, all things considered, if there's one thing I hope the remake changes, is this part of the movie. Have lions and hyenas fight in what should have been an epic and crude fight, not a tonally jarring one. Yep, I found it. Rewatching this movie I found it. I found something about it I don't like. Misplaced comedy in the third act. That's it. And with the conclusion of this third act comes also the conclusion of the movie and the time for closing remarks. First of all, having watched the whole thing through, it is amazing. The most beautiful looking movie from the Disney Renaissance era. You know that expression people use, every frame a painting? This is literally it. There's an extreme amount of polishness and vibrancy and color and power and care and love put in every frame of this picture. It's so good, it leaps off the screen. You can say that, right? To leap off the screen, that's something people say, right? Here's a selection of scenes that they blow my mind. The sun rising on Pride Rock, not only the lighting, but that sweet movement of camera. That had to be hard to animate, trust me. The entirety of I Just Can't Wait to Be King is glorious, but this scene here in particular, this scene makes me lose my mind at how good it is. Look at it! Slow it down a bit. The camera angle, the vibrant colors, the timing of the animation syncing to the beat of the music, how it plays with perspective, the incredible amount of character and personality seen by Nala display in such a short amount of frames. Is it just wow, is it good? Yes! Can't wait and see you try and top that, you soulless cash grab. The f***ing bubbles in this scene! Yeah, hear me get fired up about some bubbles. I'll tell ya why I'm so excited about the bubbles in the scenes. It's because someone made them. One animator, cause knowing a bit of the industry, it was probably one guy, drew them frame by frame. Their slight and swirling movement, their inflating and popping, which having animated similar things in the past, it's surprisingly freaking hard. All frame by frame for a 4-second scene that I'm sure took them between 3 and 5 days, not taking into consideration the characters' animations and movement. Imagine that, one guy working his worst off drawing freaking bubbles all day for a 4-second scene. They didn't have to put so much effort. They could have avoided framing this scene in such a way and sidestepped such an effort requiring job altogether. But they didn't. They chose to put the unnecessary effort and to do the hard work. And I'm not only going to acknowledge their hard work, I'm here making you focus on how great it was. That's some excellent, passionate work there, and it deserves to be pointed out. The stampede scene, on which I will not elaborate any further since I already did in my previous video, go watch it, it's right there for you to click on. And of course, this amazement of a scene, 25 years later, and I'm still not sure how they did Mufasa disappear into the clouds. I mean, I got a few educated guesses, but still, I know that was not easy to do, and it's flipping impressive. Oh, and this scene, the shifting focus from the ants to the zebras, which I am now realizing is emblematic of the whole thing of life and death, beginning and end, you know, ant and zebras. I literally got that just now writing the script. Also, since we're here pointing details, you know how there's a mom giraffe and her baby giraffe at the beginning of the movie? Well, you can see that baby giraffe again, all full grown and with her own offspring at the end of the movie. Just gotta hammer that circle of life theme. Yes, the amount of care in this movie animation is worth of the best of praises. Truly spectacular, and we'll talk about it again in a few days once the remake comes out. But on the note of polishness, me being me with my frame by frame supervision, yeah, it's my superpower, could not help but play a little game called How many moments are there in the movie where they forgot to color the eyes of the characters, leaving them white for a split second? Come on everybody at home, play with us! Go watch the entire movie again with a keen eye, or more realistically just take a guess and write it in the comments before I tell you the answer. Which is 3 times that I could count. First here, then here, and lastly here. Now, to be clear, I'm not complaining. Honestly, I'm impressed it's only these few times. Little mistakes like these ones can slip far more often than one could imagine, and most of the time, especially in traditional 2D animation, it's rather impossible to go back and fix them. And lastly, on the subject of animation, something I've always wanted to ask. Is it just me, or when Simba and Scar are fighting at the end of the movie, right here, Simba's face is really similar, seems almost switched with that of his father. Is this a coincidence, or is it intentional due to the thematic relevance of his father still living in him? Could this be me just seeing things? Anyone else ever noticed that? But before we end, there's one thing that struck me while revisiting this movie. And it's the thing that most surprised me. And what that is that the pace of this movie is fast. Not rushed, no, but really fast. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just that every scene in this movie, be it majestic or contemplative or action-packed, lasts precisely just enough to be effective without feeling rushed. And you can definitely feel that the plot is running at you, making every moment where the narrative slows down a bit all the more welcome. This probably factored in why I like the songs in this movie so much. Discovering this made me think of something, The upcoming, at least here in Italy, remake is something like 20 minutes longer than the original, and I realized that you could simply quote-unquote shoot some scenes with a bit more calm and a slower pace, and you would stretch the whole story to fit 90 plus 20 minutes without the resulting movie coming off as diluted. But more importantly and interestingly, since we do know the movie works excellently even in its original length, this means that if you do a shot-by-shot remake, which mind you I'm not saying it's a good idea and you should do that, you're left with a lot of extra time to expand or add to some scenes and concept. The Lion King works just splendidly, but there are things I'd really like to see explored more or just added to the remake. A bit more of world building, maybe a hunting scene with Mufasa and the lionesses, a more deeply and explored relationship and background for Mufasa and Scar, a little more time dedicated to Simba and Nala, either as cubs or as adults, would sell their relationship better, I think. Or scrapped ideas from the original movie, like going just a tiny bit into Timon's past life before meeting Pumbaa, or how Scar formed his alliance with the hyenas. Actually, if there's one thing I'd really love to see, it's Scar reigning. I'd like to see the reign of the pride slowly ruined by its false king. I'd like to see Scar and the hyenas in their triumph bringing havoc to the lands. And I don't want to see Rafiki doing kung fu. Pretty sure I won't, but I'm putting it out there regardless. So you know, perspective is a funny thing. One moment after watching a movie for the first time in a decade, you sincerely think to yourself, I got surprisingly little to say about it. And you're so convinced of it, you end up writing it in the script of the video. Then the next moment, you've spent a whole week writing that script that is now 13 pages long, and you're praying you will somehow turn it into less than 20 minutes long video. But I think more than anything else, this is why The Lion King is so loved and so timeless. It is because when you delve into it, when you analyze it deeply and dig through its making, its impact, its meaning, there's really no end to it. I could, talk about it for days, literally. And the more you discuss about it, the more you discover about it. This is evidence of great timeless art. Art that has always something to say, no matter who you are, no matter when you are. This is what makes a timeless classic. This is what makes a piece of art live through the years, the decades, the centuries. This is what it means to be part of the circle of life, to always have something to say, no matter who's listening. And this is what makes me love The Lion King, even to this day.